Zara Blackwell's $3,000 MacBook Pro exploded against her marble kitchen floor at 3:47 a.m., destroyed by the same hands that had just transferred her entire life savings, $47,000, to pay off credit cards she'd maxed out, buying happiness that never came. The banking app notification still glowed on the shattered screen like a digital death certificate. Transfer complete. Available balance, $127.43, 32 years old, 6-figure salary, 3 industry awards collecting dust on her minimalist shelves, and officially broker than her 22-year-old intern who lived on ramen and dreams. The irony was nuclear. She was Momentum Creative's legendary brand alchemist, the woman who could transform failing products into customer obsessions, who made Fortune 500 CEOs beg for her insights, who had turned unknown startups into cultural phenomena with a single campaign. But she couldn't figure out why her own success felt like drowning in designer quicksand, suffocating on her own abundance. The crash woke her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, whose concerned knocking through the paper-thin walls made Zara realize she'd been screaming at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stranger wearing a $400 silk pajama set from a boutique she couldn't pronounce, standing in a $4,200 monthly loft that looked like a museum exhibit titled Successful Person's Life, surrounded by $30,000 worth of stuff that made her want to disappear into the marble floor. The math was devastating, surgical in its precision. $127,000 earned this year through her brilliant mind and relentless work ethic, $126,073 spent on funding someone else's definition of what her life should look like. The evidence lay scattered around the technological wreckage, like artifacts from a civilization that had lost its way. Unworn clothes with tags still attached, $8,400 worth of fabric that had never touched her skin, kitchen gadgets for gourmet, meals she never cooked, $2,100 in stainless steel dreams, fitness equipment for workouts she religiously avoided, $800 in guilt-inducing metal, books about minimalism and intentional living she'd bought but never read, $340 in ironic wisdom. But the real horror wasn't financial bankruptcy, it was soul bankruptcy, existential poverty in the midst of material abundance. 5 years of this hamster wheel spinning faster and faster. 1,826 days of waking up rich in things and poverty-stricken in meaning, wealthy in possessions and bankrupt in purpose. Every purchase had been a desperate attempt to buy an identity that fit, like wearing clothes 3 sizes too small, trying to squeeze her authentic self into a consumer-shaped box. Her phone buzzed against the shattered laptop with a text from her sister Maya. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. Everything okay? James asked about you yesterday, said you've been MIA." Everything was perfect. The apartment screamed. The bank statements confirmed it. Her LinkedIn profile radiated success. Her Instagram feed was a masterclass in aspiration. She was dying inside, and the receipt trail proved it with forensic accuracy. Tomorrow, in just 4 hours, she'd have to face her team of eager young creatives who looked at her like she'd cracked some secret code to life. Pretend her existence was worth emulating, while internally calculating whether her emergency $127 could cover ramen noodles until payday arrived in 6 endless days. The woman who sold dreams for a living, who crafted narratives that made people believe in better versions of themselves, had purchased a nightmare she couldn't afford to wake up from. The neighbor knocked again, more urgently now. "Zara, honey, are you all right in there?" Mrs. Patterson's voice carried the worry of someone who'd heard too many 3 a.m. crashes in a building full of overworked, underfulfilled young professionals. Zara stared at the destroyed laptop, $3,000 worth of cutting-edge technology, obliterated. In the moment, she finally understood the true cost of her successful life, scattered across imported marble, like the pieces of her carefully constructed facade. The woman staring back from her bathroom mirror, lit by harsh LED strips she'd paid $400 to have professionally installed, bore no resemblance to the industry legend the outside world celebrated. This wasn't the Zara Blackwell who graced conference stages, whose TED Talk about authentic brand building had been viewed 2.3 million times, whose insights were quoted in Harvard Business Review. This was a stranger wearing her face, living in her space, drowning in her success. Zara Blackwell, 32, senior brand strategist at Momentum Creative. The woman Forbes had called the millennial money magnet for her supernatural ability to make Generation Z empty their wallets for anything she touched, who could read consumer psychology like ancient prophecy and predict purchasing behavior with uncanny accuracy. 6 years transforming boring, forgotten products into cultural phenomena that people lined up to buy. 3 Cannes Lions Awards sitting in her living room, like golden evidence of her genius. Clients who paid $50,000 just for 3-hour strategy sessions, who flew her first class to cities she was too exhausted to explore. Her colleagues at the agency called her the purchase prophet, because she could predict what people would buy months before they even knew they wanted it, could tap into the collective unconscious of consumer desire and channel it into campaigns that moved millions. The cosmic joke that kept her awake at night? She was the worst predictor of her own financial behavior in human history, a fortune teller who was blind to her own future, a therapist who couldn't heal herself. The invisible prison that held her was built from a single toxic belief, buried so deep in her unconscious that she'd never questioned its architecture. Your worth as a human being equals your purchasing power. Your value in the world is measured by what you can afford to buy, what you can afford to own, what you can afford to experience. This mental malware had been running her life's operating system since college, a virus that turned every emotion into a shopping opportunity, every achievement into ammunition for more consumption, every insecurity into a reason to buy something. That promised to fix her. Her daily life architecture looked like a masterclass in lifestyle inflation, a textbook case of how to spend your way to misery with surgical precision. $200 morning routine involving boutique fitness classes where she pretended to find inner peace while checking her phone, artisanal coffee that cost more than most people's, lunches, organic supplements that promised vitality she could never quite achieve. $150 daily food budget spent on lunch meetings that were really performance art, dinners at restaurants where the ambiance cost more than the food, where she'd sit alone scrolling through her phone while surrounded by other successful, lonely people doing exactly the same thing. $500 evening entertainment budget blown on networking events that felt like expensive theater, wine bars where conversations were business card exchanges disguised as human connection, cultural events. She attended not because she loved art, but because successful people were supposed to love art. $2,000 weekend experiences where she bought memories instead of making them, traveled to places she documented more than she experienced, paid premium prices for authentic moments that felt utterly inauthentic. The relationship graveyard told the real story of what this lifestyle had cost her in human connection. Maya had stopped calling regularly after Zara missed her birthday party, not for work, but for an $800 wine tasting where she'd learned about terroir while losing touch with her own roots. Her college friend James had given up inviting her to his backyard barbecues and game nights, tired of hearing that she couldn't make it because she had something important that usually involved spending money to feel successful. Her dating life had become a parade of men who fell in love with her lifestyle before they met her, who were more interested in her expensive tastes than her actual personality, who saw her as an accessory to their own ambitions rather than a human being with hopes and fears and dreams that had nothing to do with brands or budgets or the perfect Instagram aesthetic. If you're watching this and thinking, this could be me, if you recognize yourself in this expensive mirror of modern success, hit subscribe right now. This community is your escape route from financial quicksand, and what happens next will fundamentally change how you see money, success, and what it actually means to live a wealthy life forever. The success paradox was perfectly perverse, a cruel joke that the universe seemed to be playing specifically on her. The better she got at creating desire in others, at tapping into that primal consumer urge that made people want things they didn't need, the more she consumed to fill her own existential void. She helped brands build authentic connections with their customers, while her own relationships suffocated under the weight of designer price tags and premium experiences. She crafted marketing messages about finding your true self and living authentically, while losing herself piece by piece in an avalanche of receipts and credit card statements. She taught companies how to create genuine emotional bonds with their audiences while becoming emotionally bonded to objects, experiences, and a lifestyle that promised fulfillment, but delivered only the temporary high of acquisition followed by the inevitable crash of buyer's remorse. The ticking clock wasn't subtle anymore. It was deafening, like a bomb counting down to her personal financial apocalypse. 3 maxed-out credit cards, each one a testament to her ability to finance her own destruction. A lease renewal notice sitting on her kitchen counter, demanding first month, last month, and security deposit that she didn't have, wouldn't have, couldn't imagine having. Rent due in exactly 12 days, and a savings account that looked like a rounding error, a mathematical joke. But the real deadline was psychological, existential. How long could she maintain the gorgeous illusion of success, while financially hemorrhaging from wounds she'd inflicted on herself? How many more $3,000 of breakdowns before she admitted that the woman who could sell ice to penguins in a heat wave couldn't sell herself a life worth living? How many more nights would she lie awake, calculating whether she could afford groceries, while surrounded by evidence of her wealth? The strangest part of this entire nightmare: she was internationally recognized for one thing above all else: transformation. She could take the most boring, forgettable product and transform it into something people desperately wanted, needed, had to have. She could take unknown brands and turn them into household names. She could transform consumer behavior, market perceptions, entire industry landscapes. She was a transformation expert for everyone except herself, a healer who couldn't heal her own wounds, a guide who was utterly, completely lost. The collision that would change everything happened in the most unlikely, undignified place imaginable: the employee bathroom on the 7th floor of Momentum Creative, where Zara was hiding from her own life like a child in a closet, crying over a $12 smoothie she couldn't afford, but had bought anyway because successful. People drank $12 smoothies, and she was supposed to be successful. "You look like someone who just realized they're spending their life to death." The voice cut through her private breakdown like a surgical instrument. Dr. Elena Vasquez, 54, leaned against the bathroom sink with the casual confidence of someone who'd seen this exact scene play out 1,000 times before. The company's new financial wellness consultant carried Harvard MBA credentials and the deeply unsettling ability to see through carefully constructed bullshit at 50 paces. Her presence radiated the particular kind of calm that only comes from someone who'd survived their own financial apocalypse and lived to decode the wreckage for others. "I'm fine," Zara lied with the automatic precision of someone who'd weaponized positivity as a defense mechanism, whose professional success depended on appearing to have it all together at all times. The words tasted like sawdust in her mouth. Elena's laugh was sharp as surgical steel, cutting through pretense with merciless accuracy. "Fine? You just spent $12 on blended fruit while having what appears to be a full-scale panic attack in a corporate bathroom. That's not fine. That's expensive self-destruction with a wellness marketing wrapper." Before Zara could mount a defense, construct another lie, or flee to a different floor, Elena pulled out her phone and opened a simple notes app with the casual efficiency of a surgeon preparing for an operation. "Let me show you something that's going to blow your mind. Traditional budget versus heart audit. Most people, probably including you, organize their money like this." She typed with swift fingers: rent, food, transportation, entertainment, shopping, miscellaneous. These are categories that have absolutely zero relationship to who you actually are as a human being, what you actually care about, what actually brings meaning to your existence. They're accounting categories masquerading as life categories, and they're why you feel like you're funding someone else's life. Then she created something that made reality crack open like an egg, revealing something Zara had never considered possible. "But what if, and stay with me here, because this is going to sound revolutionary, what if you organized your money around your soul instead of your spreadsheet?" The new list appeared on her screen: connection, growth, impact, creativity, peace, adventure, service. "That's impossible," Zara whispered, but her voice lacked the conviction of someone who truly believed her own words. The categories Elena had written seemed to glow on the screen, each one representing something she'd forgotten she'd ever wanted. Is it impossible? Or is it just different from what you've been programmed to believe about money? Elena's eyes were kind but relentless. Quick question, and I want you to answer instinctively, without thinking about what you're supposed to say. What would you pay any amount of money to protect? The question hit like a wrecking ball demolishing a condemned building, revealing the foundation that had been buried under years of consumer debris. Zara found herself talking about things she hadn't spoken about in years. The art classes she'd abandoned when she got too busy for creativity, the deep friendships she'd neglected in favor of networking, the environmental work she'd dreamed about but never pursued, the creative projects that lived only in her imagination, gathering dust, like the art supplies she'd bought and never used. Now here's the question that changes everything, Elena said, her finger hovering over the heart audit categories like a divining rod over hidden water. How much money did you spend on those values? The things you just told me you'd pay anything to protect. How much did you spend on those last month? The silence that followed stretched like a chasm opening in the bathroom floor. Zero. The answer was zero. She'd spent $0 on connection, zero on growth, zero on impact, zero on creativity, zero on peace. She'd spent $7,000 on categories that had nothing to do with who she was, and $0 on everything that actually mattered to her. Your bank statement is your real autobiography, Elena continued with the gentle ruthlessness of a therapist who knows exactly which scab to pick. It's the most honest document you'll ever produce because it shows where you actually put your energy, not where you say you put it. And right now, your autobiography is telling the story of someone who values appearances over authenticity, consumption over connection, status over soul, image over impact. Hit the notification bell right now. You're about to witness the exact moment that breaks the matrix of consumer culture, and you'll want to remember precisely when your relationship with money changed forever, when you stopped being a victim of your own spending and became the author of your own financial story. Elena's demonstration was surgical in its precision and devastating in its implications. She made Zara audit her last month of spending, categorizing every transaction not by traditional budget categories, but by value alignment. The results looked like a psychological crime scene. 97% of her money had gone to values she didn't even hold, funding a life that belonged to someone else entirely. Here's what nobody tells you about money, Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd discovered fire and was trying to share it with someone still shivering in the dark. Every dollar you spend is a vote. Every transaction is a ballot you're casting for the kind of person you want to become, the kind of life you want to live, and you've been voting for someone else's life for so long that you've forgotten what your own preferences even are. The revelation hit Zara like ice water. She wasn't just financially broke, she was spiritually bankrupt, voting against herself with every purchase, funding her own misery with scientific precision. Zara's first attempt at heart-based spending was an $800 disaster that nearly ended her transformation before it truly started. A cautionary tale about the gap between intention and execution that almost sent her running back to the familiar misery of unconscious consumption. She'd allocated her last $500 to a new category she called her connection fund, deciding with the optimism of someone who'd never actually hosted a dinner party that she'd reconnect with the friends she'd been neglecting by bringing them together for an intimate evening of food, wine, and real conversation. The theory was beautiful. The execution was a comedy of errors that would have been hilarious if it hadn't been so expensive. Her minimalist loft, she quickly discovered, was designed for Instagram photos, not human gatherings. The space looked gorgeous in carefully curated social media posts, but was utterly unsuitable for actually hosting people who needed places to sit, eat, and exist comfortably. Panic buying ensued with the fury of someone trying to solve years of social neglect in a single afternoon. Furniture rentals from a company that charged premium prices for basic comfort, $180. Ingredients for ambitious recipes she'd never attempted, from a chef whose cookbook she'd bought but never opened, $220. Wine expensive enough to mask her terror that the evening would be a disaster, $150. Plus emergency Uber Eats when everything she'd attempted to cook caught fire, set off the smoke. Alarm and left her kitchen looking like a war zone, 90. The night ended with smoke detectors shrieking like banshees, awkward silences that stretched longer than the dinner table she'd rented, and friends who seemed more confused than connected, more concerned about her mental state than enjoying the evening she'd spent a fortune trying to create. They left early, citing various obligations, leaving Zara alone with the wreckage of her good intentions and a credit card bill that made her stomach hurt. Her internal saboteur launched a full-scale assault on her fragile new beliefs, speaking, in the voice of every advertisement she'd ever absorbed, every message about worth and success that consumer culture had programmed into her operating system. This is delusional. You're not built for authentic living. You don't know how to do simple, real things. You are your purchases. Without them, you're nobody special, nobody interesting, nobody worth knowing. This poverty cosplay ends now. Go back to what you know, what works, what makes sense. Buy your way back to feeling successful. Here's where 97% of people surrender to their golden handcuffs, where they decide that the familiar misery of unconscious spending is safer than the uncertain territory of aligned living. But Zara's about to discover something that changes the game completely, something that transforms failure into fuel and disaster into data. But something had shifted in the wreckage of that disastrous evening, something subtle but seismic. Despite the obvious failure, despite the money wasted and the awkwardness created, she'd felt more alive during the 3 hours of planning that doomed dinner party than she had during months of perfect restaurant experiences where everything was curated, controlled, and utterly predictable. The micro-success wasn't the event itself, it was the intention behind it, the first genuine attempt she'd made in years to spend money on what she claimed to value rather than what she thought would make her look successful. She'd failed spectacularly, but she'd failed in the direction of her values rather than succeeding in the direction of someone else's expectations. The deeper problem revealed itself during a 4 a.m. anxiety spiral that had become as regular as her overpriced morning routine. Her entire identity was consumption-based, built on a foundation of what she could afford rather than who she actually was. Strip away the purchases, the brands, the experiences that money could buy, and what remained? The question terrified her more than her empty bank account because the answer felt like nothing, a void where a personality should be. The relatable moment that would later become one of her most powerful teaching stories came during a team meeting, where Miranda, one of their biggest clients, complimented Zara's effortless elegance and asked for advice on achieving the same sophisticated lifestyle. Zara almost laughed out loud at the irony. Nothing about her life was effortless. It was a full-time performance that cost $7,000 monthly to maintain, a theatrical production requiring constant rehearsal, perfect timing, and an enormous budget for costumes and sets. The breakthrough disguised itself as comedy, arrived wearing the mask of sisterly concern wrapped in laughter. Maya called during Zara's second Connection Fund experiment, a hiking trip that she'd approached with characteristic over-preparation, purchasing $400 worth of technical outdoor gear for a 2-hour walk in a local park that resulted in her designer workout clothes being covered in actual mud for the first time in their expensive existence. You realize you can wash those, right? Maya laughed when Zara called to complain about ruining her gear. Or were you planning to bronze them as modern art, frame them as evidence that you touched nature once? The question was joking, but it hit something deeper. When had she become someone who bought outdoor gear as a costume rather than a tool, who purchased the idea of adventure rather than actually having adventures? For the first time in months, Zara laughed until her ribs ached, laughed at herself at the absurdity of buying happiness, at the cosmic joke of her life. And in that laughter, she found something she'd forgotten existed, joy that didn't require a receipt. The commitment decision crystallized while she sat on her bathroom floor at 2 a.m., surrounded by credit card statements that read like a horror novel, each page documenting another month of financing her own destruction. Continue funding her own misery with scientific precision, or trust that somewhere between the burned dinner and the muddy clothes, she'd found breadcrumbs leading back to herself, back to someone who existed independent of her purchasing power. The choice was brutal in its simplicity, Maintain the beautiful lie that was slowly killing her, or face the ugly truth that might actually set her free. She chose truth, even though it scared her more than bankruptcy, more than failure, more than admitting that everything she'd worked for had led her to this bathroom floor covered in evidence of her own self-sabotage. The real work was about to begin, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to see it through. This is the moment that shatters everything you think you know about money, wealth, success, and what it actually means to live a rich life. Pay attention, because what happens next has the power to change your relationship with every dollar you'll ever spend. 6 weeks after her laptop-smashing breakdown, Zara sat in Elena's office, her life in chaos and her bank account in intensive care when the revelation that would change everything arrived disguised as a simple question that sounded almost innocent. "What if I told you," Elena said, leaning back in her chair with the confidence of someone who'd discovered a fundamental truth about human nature, "that every financially miserable person I've ever met, and I've met thousands, was actually suffering from the exact same addiction?" Zara looked up from her coffee, a homemade brew that cost $0.50 to make, and somehow tasted more satisfying than her old $8 daily habit from the artisanal cafe that had become a symbol of her former life. "What addiction?" Elena stood and walked to her whiteboard with the purposeful stride of someone about to reveal the secret of the universe. She drew a simple equation that would become the foundation of everything that followed. Contentment equals enough divided by want. Most people approach financial wellness exactly backwards, Elena explained, underlining the equation. They try to increase the numerator. More money, more stuff, more experiences, more everything. They think the path to contentment is addition, accumulation, expansion. But the real transformation, the lasting transformation, happens in the denominator. She paused, letting the implications sink in. When you align your wants with your values, when you get intentional about desire itself, enough becomes infinite. You don't need more money to be content. You need to want more consciously. The quotable wisdom hit Zara like lightning striking a tree, illuminating everything in a single flash. You can't purchase your way to peace, but you can spend your way to consciousness. Every transaction is either building your authentic life or funding your destruction. There is no neutral spending, no meaningless money. Every dollar is a choice, every purchase a vote for who you're becoming. The metaphor that had been building in her consciousness evolved with devastating clarity. She hadn't been trapped in a golden cage. She'd been the architect, the builder, the contractor, and the willing prisoner. Every purchase had been another bar welded into place, every transaction another lock turned, every investment in herself another layer of beautiful imprisonment. The cage wasn't the problem. The cage was the symptom. The builder was the problem, and the builder was her, operating from unconscious programming that equated spending with self-care, accumulation with achievement, consumption with contentment. Elena introduced what she called the values velocity formula, a framework that would become the cornerstone of Zara's new relationship with money. Instead of tracking what you spend money on, the traditional categories that tell you nothing about whether you're building the life you want, track what you spend money for. Track the emotional outcomes, the value alignment, the life-building purpose of every dollar. She showed Zara how to categorize every expense by emotional and spiritual outcome. Connection, 30% of spending devoted to building and maintaining relationships. Growth, 25% invested in becoming a better version of herself. Impact, 20% channeled toward making a positive difference. Creativity, 15% allocated to artistic expression and innovation. Security, 10% dedicated to genuine safety and stability rather than lifestyle inflation. Most people are addicted to buying things, Elena continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen through the illusion and couldn't unsee it. But the real addiction, the one that destroys lives and relationships and souls, is the addiction to buying feelings. People shop for confidence, for love, for excitement, for peace, for meaning. The problem isn't the money, it's that you're trying to purchase emotions instead of creating them, trying to buy experiences instead of living them. The universal principle emerged like dawn after the longest night, simple and revolutionary. Your bank statement is your real value system. Everything else, your stated beliefs, your good intentions, your aspirational goals, is just marketing copy you tell yourself. Your money shows what you actually prioritize, what you actually believe, what you actually value when faced with real choices in the real world. The contrarian insight that challenged everything she'd been taught about financial success landed like a bomb in her worldview. The secret to wealth isn't earning more, it's wanting more intentionally. Poor people can't afford what they want. Rich people don't want what they can't afford. The fastest path to financial freedom isn't through your salary, it's through your desires. The mathematical revelation was staggering in its implications. Zara's Authentic Life Index, a metric Elena had developed to measure alignment between stated values and actual spending, had been 3% for 5 years. 3%. She'd been living 97% of someone else's life, funding 97% of someone else's dreams, building 97% of someone else's version of success. No wonder she felt like she was drowning in her own abundance. She literally was living someone else's life, one purchase at a time, one transaction at a time, one unconscious choice at a time. Elena's final bomb exploded everything Zara thought she knew about money. Here's what the financial industry will never tell you. What they can't tell you because their entire business model depends on you. Not understanding this, the goal isn't financial freedom, it's freedom from the compulsion to buy your way to happiness. True wealth isn't about having enough money to buy anything you want. True wealth is about not wanting anything you can't afford, about being free from the need to purchase your way to contentment. The before and after clarity was brutal in its honesty. Old Zara had spent $7,000 monthly, feeling empty, anxious, disconnected, and spiritually bankrupt. New Zara, still learning, still struggling, but fundamentally different, was spending $12,800 monthly and feeling more fulfilled than she had in years. Same person, same brain, same fundamental capacity for happiness, completely different story. But the real transformation wasn't financial. It was psychological, spiritual, existential. She'd discovered the difference between standard of living and quality of life, between being wealthy and being rich, between having money and having meaning. Standard of living was about what you could afford to buy. Quality of life was about what you chose to value. Wealth was about accumulation. Richness was about alignment. The proof was undeniable, documented in spreadsheets that told a story of transformation. Her life satisfaction had increased 300%, while her spending decreased 60%. The inverse relationship wasn't coincidental, it was revolutionary. Evidence of a fundamental truth about human happiness that consumer culture works over time to obscure. Here's the secret they don't teach in business school. That they can't teach because it would destroy entire industries built on manufacturing dissatisfaction. The richest people aren't those who can afford anything. They're those who know what's worth buying, what's worth having, what's worth wanting. In the first place, the room fell silent as the implications settled like dust after an explosion. Now the question isn't whether this works, Elena concluded, her voice gentle but implacable. The question is whether you're brave enough to live it when everyone around you is still shopping for their identity, still funding their own misery, still participating in the collective delusion that more stuff equals more happiness. Zara looked at her reflection in Elena's office window. Same face, same eyes, same basic human architecture, but someone completely different living behind them. Someone who'd learned that the most expensive lesson of her life was also the most valuable. Knowing the price of everything and understanding the value of what actually mattered. The universe's sense of timing was either perfectly cruel or perfectly comedic, arriving with the precision of a cosmic punchline designed specifically to test everything she'd learned. 3 months into her financial recovery, just as she was beginning to believe that her transformation might actually be sustainable, Zara received the email that would test everything. An offer from Pinnacle Brand House, the most prestigious creative agency in the industry, offering her the creative director position she'd dreamed about since graduating college. The package was intoxicating. $140,000 salary, a 65% increase, equity that could make her genuinely wealthy, a corner office with views of the city, unlimited, expense account, travel budget that would let her work with clients around the world, and access to the kind of high-profile campaigns that launched careers into the stratosphere. Everything old Zara had ever wanted, wrapped in a contract that felt like validation of everything she'd worked for. The catch, and there's always a catch when the universe decides to test your newfound wisdom, was a culture that measured human worth by billable hours and expense account receipts. 80-hour weeks were the norm, not the exception. Constant travel meant relationships became logistical challenges. Success was measured by how much of your life you were willing to sacrifice for the job, how completely you were willing to dissolve your personal identity into your professional persona. Everything her heart ledger had taught her to recognize as expensive poison disguised as success, wrapped in the beautiful packaging of career advancement and financial security. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Her answer would determine whether her transformation was real or just an expensive phase, whether she'd truly learned to value her values or would abandon them the moment someone offered her enough money. Thursday night, Zara did something that would have horrified her former self, something that violated every rule of traditional career advancement. She calculated the true cost of success using her values velocity framework, treating the job offer like any other purchase, subjecting it to the same analysis she now applied to every financial decision. Connection, minus 70%. Relationships become transactional when you're never available for the people you love. Growth, plus 40% for prestigious professional skills, minus 90% for personal development that dies under the weight of 80-hour weeks. Impact, plus 30% for working on bigger, more visible projects, minus 60% for compromising environmental and social values for clients who profit from exactly the kind of consumption she'd learned to question. Creativity, plus 50% for high-profile campaigns that would showcase her talents, minus 80% for abandoning personal creative projects that fed her soul but generated no income. Peace, minus 95% as stress becomes not just an occasional visitor, but a permanent resident, taking over every room in her life until there's nowhere left to breathe. The math was devastating in its clarity. A 65% salary increase would require a 200% decrease in life satisfaction. She'd be paying $60,000 extra per year to make herself systematically miserable, to fund her own destruction with more precision and efficiency than ever before. Friday afternoon arrived with the weight of destiny. Zara walked into the glass tower of Pinnacle Brand House, riding the elevator to the 42nd floor, where 3 executives waited to make her rich and wretched, to offer her everything she thought she wanted and nothing she actually needed. The conference room was a monument to expensive taste. Mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars, chairs that were works of art, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that seemed to say, you could own all of this. Marcus Webb, the CEO, sat at the head of the table with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no applied to a salary offer this generous. Zara, we've been following your work for years, Webb began, sliding a contract across the mahogany surface with the casual confidence of someone offering candy to a child. This creative director position isn't just a job. It's a career-defining opportunity. The kind of role that puts you on the map permanently, that makes you a household name in our industry. Old Zara would have signed the contract in her own blood, would have thanked them for the privilege of surrendering her life to their vision of success. New Zara, still learning, still growing, still discovering who she was when she wasn't defined by her purchasing power, asked a question that made the room temperature drop by several degrees. Before we discuss specific terms, can you tell me about your philosophy on work-life integration? I'm very intentional about how I invest my time and energy, and I want to make sure there's alignment between my values and the culture here. The pause that followed stretched like a surgical incision, revealing the truth beneath the beautiful packaging. Webb recovered with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd spent decades in corporate communications, launching into familiar speak about dynamic challenges and growth mindset and fast-paced environment. Executive code phrases that translated directly to, "We will own your soul and you will thank us for the privilege." "The thing about our industry," Webb continued, his smile never wavering, "is that extraordinary results require extraordinary commitment. We're not looking for people who want to clock in and clock out. We're looking for people who understand that true success means being all in, all the time." Sarah Chen, the CMO, nodded enthusiastically. "Our most successful people don't see work-life balance as a goal. They see work-life integration as an opportunity. When you love what you do as much as we love what we do, the lines blur in the most beautiful way." Zara felt something crystallize in her chest, a clarity that cut through the seductive promises and expensive packaging to reveal the truth underneath. "I'm incredibly honored by this offer," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do, "but I need to respectfully decline. This role would require me to compromise values that aren't negotiable for me anymore." The silence that followed was deafening, the kind of quiet that happens when someone says something so unexpected that reality needs a moment to recalibrate. Webb's smile flickered like a candle in wind. Sarah Chen blinked as if she'd misheard. The third executive, who hadn't spoken yet, leaned forward with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that made no sense. Then something unexpected happened, something that would change the trajectory of not just Zara's career, but several other lives in that room. Sarah Chen leaned forward with genuine curiosity instead of corporate judgment, her professional mask slipping to reveal actual human interest. "What values specifically?" Sarah asked, and there was something in her voice that suggested she wasn't asking for the company, she was asking for herself. "I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, I'm genuinely curious what kind of values would make someone turn down an opportunity like this. Comment below if you've ever chosen meaning over money. If you've ever walked away from something that looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in your soul. Your courage inspires others and helps build this community of conscious spenders who understand that some things can't be bought." Zara took a breath and did something that would have terrified her 6 months earlier. She shared her values velocity framework with a room full of strangers who thought she was insane. She talked about connection and growth and impact and creativity and peace. She explained how she'd learned to categorize every decision, including career decisions, by whether it moved her toward or away from the life she actually wanted to. Leverkas, instead of the dismissal she expected, she saw something she hadn't anticipated: recognition. Sarah's eyes lit up with the spark of someone hearing their own thoughts reflected back to them. "You know," Sarah said slowly, "I've been questioning my own 90-hour weeks lately. Last month I spent $15,000 on stress management, therapy, massage, expensive vacations to recover from work, and I realized I was paying premium prices to fix problems that my job was creating." Webb looked uncomfortable, as if the conversation had veered into territory he couldn't control with salary negotiations and benefit packages. But Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "What if, and I'm just thinking out loud here, what if instead of this traditional creative director role we offered you a consulting arrangement, same creative challenges, same high-profile projects, but with a flexible structure that honors your skills without consuming your life?" The immediate results were surprising to everyone in the room, including Zara. Rather than career suicide, authenticity had created opportunity. The consulting contract they negotiated paid $85,000 annually for roughly half the hours and twice the creative freedom, with the flexibility to work on projects that aligned with her values and decline those that didn't. But the real magic happened in the ripple effects that followed. Maya called that same night, and for the first time in years they talked for 2 hours about things that mattered. Not about Zara's latest purchases or professional achievements, but about dreams and fears and the kinds of conversations that build sisterhood rather than envy. "You sound like yourself again," Maya said before hanging up. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed my actual sister." James, who had given up inviting her to his casual gatherings, sent a text the next week. "Heard through the grapevine that you're doing some kind of life overhaul. We're having a backyard barbecue Saturday. Nothing fancy, just good people and real conversation. Interested?" For the first time in 2 years, she said yes, without checking her calendar for more important, more expensive, more networking valuable options. 4 colleagues secretly approached her over the next month, intrigued by whatever transformation had given her the confidence to turn down a dream job. They wanted to understand her budgeting philosophy, though what they were really asking about was her courage to live according to her own definition of success rather than someone else's blueprint. The measurement proof was undeniable and became part of her eventual book. 6 months later, Zara's income had stabilized at $75,000, down $10,000 from her original salary. But her Life Wealth Index, a comprehensive metric she'd developed to track genuine prosperity, had exploded upward like a rocket breaking free from gravity. Monthly spending had dropped to $2,400, down from the insane $7,000 that had nearly killed her. Monthly savings had increased to $3,100 from essentially zero, and monthly investment in values. Aligned experiences had risen to $1,500, but the numbers that mattered most couldn't be captured in spreadsheets. Hours of genuine sleep per night, conversations that lasted longer than elevator rides, creative projects that existed for their own sake rather than for Instagram content. The secondary validation came from Elena during one of their monthly check-ins. "You've become my favorite case study to share with other clients, not because of your financial numbers, though those are impressive, but because you chose authentic wealth over counterfeit success. You proved that it's possible to opt out of the game everyone thinks they have to play." The sustainability test proved that her transformation was permanent rather than temporary, that she'd fundamentally rewired her relationship with money rather than just gone through a phase. A year later, she'd weathered economic uncertainty when the consulting market tightened, relationship challenges when she started dating someone who initially couldn't understand her lifestyle choices, and family pressure when her parents worried she was throwing away her potential. Through all of it, she maintained her values-based approach to money, using her framework to navigate decisions both large and small. Her cottage, a 2-bedroom rental that cost half what her old loft had cost and felt twice as much like home, had become an unofficial gathering place for friends seeking similar transformations in their own lives. She'd accidentally become a teacher of the things she'd learned to live, a guide for people who were drowning in their own success and looking for a life preserver that wasn't made of credit and consumption. 2 years later, Zara stood before 200 business executives in a conference room that could have been the site of her own corporate capitulation, teaching the framework that had saved her life to people who were drowning in the same golden quicksand as she'd escaped. The venue was ironic and perfect, the top floor of a building dedicated to commerce, filled with people who'd achieved everything they thought they wanted and discovered it wasn't enough. The transformation proof was measurable, shocking, and became the opening slide of every presentation she gave. Annual spending had dropped from $127,000 to $28,800, a 77% reduction that had corresponded with a 400% increase in self-reported life satisfaction. She'd launched Heart Ledger Consulting, helping professionals escape their financial prisons, one spreadsheet at a time. Her book, The Purchase Trap: How to Stop Buying Your Way to Misery, had hit bestseller lists in 3 categories and was being translated into 12 languages. Her relationship with Maya had evolved into the kind of sisterhood that people write songs about, built on shared values rather than shared expenses, on genuine connection rather than expensive experiences. She was engaged to Phoenix Martinez, the ceramics artist she'd met during one of her early creative fund experiments. Their relationship, a testament to the power of connections built on authenticity rather than acquisition, on shared values rather than shared spending power. 2 years ago, she told the audience, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged holding wisdom instead of ashes, I destroyed a $3,000 laptop because I finally understood I was spending myself to death. I was earning 6 figures and felt like I was dying inside, successful by every metric that mattered to everyone except me. Today, I want to show you the 3 principles that will save you from the same expensive suicide I was committing. 1. Purchase at a time. The room was silent with the attention of people who recognized their own story in hers, who saw themselves in the mirror she was holding up to consumer culture. Here are the 3 universal laws of authentic wealth that will transform your relationship with money forever, that will free you from the prison of unconscious spending and give you back your life. First, the consciousness law. Every dollar you spend is a vote for who you're becoming, a ballot cast in the election of your own life. When you're unconscious about money, when you spend without intention or awareness, you're voting for someone else's version of your life, someone else's definition of success, someone else's idea of what will make you happy. Consciousness isn't about spending less, though that often happens naturally. It's about spending intentionally with full awareness of what you're voting for with every transaction. Second, the values velocity principle. Organize your budget around your soul, not society's categories. Traditional budgeting categories, rent, food, transportation, entertainment, tell you nothing about whether you're building the life you actually want to live. Instead, organize your money around your values: connection, growth, impact, creativity, peace, adventure, service. If connection matters more than status, your bank statement should reflect that truth. Your money should be working for your values, not against them. Third, the authentic wealth equation. True wealth equals enough divided by want. This is the most revolutionary insight of all. Poor people can't afford what they want. Rich people don't want what they can't afford. The fastest way to wealth isn't earning more money, though there's nothing wrong with earning more. It's wanting more consciously, more intentionally, more aligned with who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. Your bank statement is your autobiography written in transactions, your real memoir told in dollars and cents. Every purchase tells the story of who you think you are, what you believe you deserve, what you think will make you happy. The beautiful truth is that you can edit that story, one conscious choice at a time, one intentional decision at a time, one values-aligned purchase at a time. 2 years ago, I spent $127,000 funding someone else's definition of my life and wanted to die. Last year, I spent $2,800 building my authentic life and felt more alive than I had in decades. The difference wasn't the amount, it was the alignment. The difference wasn't the money, it was the consciousness behind every dollar, the legacy. Impact extended far beyond personal transformation, creating waves that rippled out through families, companies, and communities. Elena had incorporated heart ledger methodology into corporate wellness programs at Fortune 500 companies, helping thousands of employees escape their own versions of expensive misery. Sarah Chen had left her executive role to launch a non-profit, teaching financial consciousness to young professionals, preventing them from making the same mistakes she and Zara had made. Phoenix had started an art therapy program that used creativity budgets to help people reconnect with their authentic selves through making rather than buying. The ripple effects had become a movement, a quiet revolution of people choosing consciousness over consumption, alignment over accumulation, values over volumes. Zara's consulting practice had helped 847 people restructure their financial lives using the heart ledger methodology. The average client reduced spending by 45%, while increasing life satisfaction by 280%, numbers that sounded impossible until you understood that most people were funding their own misery with scientific precision, spending money on things that actively made them less happy. 63 clients had changed careers to align with their values, discovering that they could earn less money and live more richly. 41 had started businesses based on their authentic priorities rather than market opportunities, creating companies that served their souls as well as their bank accounts. The transformation was contagious, spreading from person to person like a beneficial virus that cured the disease of unconscious consumption. Your transformation starts now, in this moment, with this breath, with this decision to treat your money as a tool for consciousness rather than an instrument of unconscious destruction. Comment below and share your biggest financial wake-up call, the moment you realized you might be spending your way to misery rather than happiness. Let's build this conscious community together, supporting each other as we learn to vote for our authentic lives with every dollar we spend. Start with 1 month. Just 1 month of tracking every expense by value instead of category. Ask yourself, with every purchase, does this transaction vote for who I want to become? Does this dollar move me toward or away from the life I actually want to live? Then, watch as your money transforms from a source of stress and confusion into a tool for building the life you were meant to live. The workshop ended with participants creating their first heart ledgers, designing budgets that reflected their souls instead of their fears, their values instead of their insecurities, their authentic desires instead of manufactured wants. Zara watched 200 successful people discover that they'd been successful at building someone else's life and choose to redirect their energy toward building their own. As Zara packed her materials, a young woman approached with tears streaming down, her face and a credit card clutched in her trembling hand. "I was going to buy another $500 handbag after this event," she whispered. "I always buy something expensive when I feel emotional, when I feel like I need to prove I'm worth something. Instead, I'm going to call my sister and tell her I miss her. I'm going to spend my connection fund on a plane ticket to visit her instead of another piece of leather that will sit in my closet and judge me." That evening, as Zara cleaned soil from her hands in the garden she'd planted behind her cottage, vegetables and flowers growing in earth that belonged to someone else, but felt more like home than the expensive loft she'd once owned, she marveled at the alchemy of authentic transformation. She'd learned the most expensive lesson of her life. The cost of living authentically was nothing compared to the price of funding your own destruction. The price of consciousness was a bargain compared to the expense of unconsciousness. The investment in values-aligned living paid dividends that no financial advisor could calculate, returns that couldn't be measured in dollars, but could be felt in every breath, every relationship, every moment of peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Proud of you for saving yourself and teaching others to do the same. Can't wait for Sunday dinner at your place. I'm bringing dessert." Sunday dinners had become a tradition, gatherings of people who'd chosen connection over consumption, who'd learned that the best things in life weren't things at all. The final truth lingered in the evening air like a prayer answered, like a secret finally understood, like a riddle that revealed its wisdom only to those brave enough to stop shopping for answers and start living them. The richest people aren't those who can afford anything. They're those who know what's worth having, what's worth wanting, what's worth living for, and brave enough to spend only on that.